Hello, I am Alyssa, and today I'm sharing with you my October 2020 favorites. I know I'm late as usual. I'm sorry guys, I know I'm always late with these. But if you've never checked out one of my favorite videos before, that's where I list my favorite movies, TV shows, video games, books that I loved the previous month. And yeah, I just like to recommend stuff to you. Maybe you haven't watched or played or read what I talk about and you're interested in it, and then I convert you to it and I'm like, yeah! Or you might hate it and I'm like, that's cool too. But I also want to know what you've been reading, watching, and playing, so let me know down below in the comments. I will have timestamps so you can jump between genres? Categories, there we go. So if you aren't interested in one, you can go to the other. So let's begin with movies. So with my movies, I do show my entire Letterboxd watch list for that month. So you get to see what I loved and what I hated. If you'd like to follow me on Letterboxd, the link is in the description box down below the video. So the first movie I watched in October was Hush. This was a rewatch for me. I wanted to watch it with my dad. I actually increased my score for this movie after seeing it for the second time. I just think it's a really genius take on the home invasion genre. I'm a huge fan of Mike Flanagan. I think he's one of the greatest horror directors of our current generation. Of course, I love his wife, Kate Siegel. She is the main character in this. And the plot of this, without giving too much away, is Kate Siegel plays a character named Maddie who is both deaf and mute. And, of course, her home is invaded by this strange man. She can't talk to anyone. She can't hear anything. So she has to use her other senses to try to fight off this guy from, doing something horrible to her or to her neighbors that live far away. This is a really, really excellently crafted film. There is an Easter egg to Mike Flanagan's current project in this movie. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix. It's only 82 minutes long. And I think, again, it's genius, so check it out. Next up, I watched Spiral. I wasn't too crazy about this. This is streaming on Shudder. I did like the premise of the movie. It is about a same-sex couple and their adopted daughter. Alexa, stop! Technology, guys. Moving to a new neighborhood, and their neighbors are just plain out creepy. Plain out creepy? I don't know what I'm saying. I know a lot of people love this movie, but I felt like it just kind of didn't gel all together well. Like, again, I love the premise. The acting was fairly good. I didn't think it was as great as it could have been, but I know a lot of people did love it, so if you're interested in it, it's on Shudder. You can stream it. It's an hour and a half. Check it out for yourself, make up your own mind. I just didn't care for it that much. I still gave it 3 out of 5 stars. But yeah, I thought it could have been better. And I forgot to mention I gave Hush 4 out of 5 stars. Also, if you see a heart next to any of the movies I mentioned, that means they're a favorite. So I watched The Witches for the first time ever in my life. And I had heard that this was a very traumatizing children's horror movie. And I would have been traumatized if I had seen this as a child because I was a major scaredy cat, which I know is probably a shock because I'm super into horror now. But back when I was a kid, this would have freaked me the F out. But I really love this film. I have not watched the remake yet. But Nicholas Roeg, it feels like a Nicholas Roeg movie, but, toned down for families to watch. And it definitely has that Roald Dahl feel, which he was the author of the book. If you don't know what The Witch is about, it's about this boy and his grandma traveling to this hotel on the beach in England after tragedy has struck and the grandmother has fallen ill, but they don't realize that when they go there, there is a coven of witches convening at the hotel for a conference, and they want to transform every child in England and the world into mice because they hate children so, so much. And that's all I'm going to say. It's so clever. Angelica Houston as the head witch, Miss Eva Ernst, as this Letterboxd cast list says, because I couldn't remember her name. I just knew she was the High Witch. Wonderful. Oh my gosh. If I could be her, I would be her. Just because she was so fabulous. But the practical effects still hold up today. The special effects, not so much. Practical effects, though, wonderful. This is definitely a classic film. If you haven't watched it, do so. Again, I don't know if it'd be great for younger children to watch because there are some, iffy scenes, but I think older children would be okay with it. Yeah, I love The Witches. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I watched Slither. This was the only James Gunn film I had not seen yet, and I've since corrected that, and I loved it. 4 out of 5 stars. Let's see, what did I put in my review? I quoted Nathan Fillion's character, "Well, that's some effed up BS." You can see it on the screen. But I really loved it. It's a horror comedy. It's about how Michael Rooker's character, which Michael Rooker is always excellent, is infected with this alien parasite, and then he starts to infect the whole town. His wife, played by Elizabeth Banks, is kind of helpless in the situation. Nathan Fillion is the town sheriff. It's just so fun. It's so fun. It is pretty gross. It really leans heavily into body horror. So if you're turned off by that, you're not gonna like Slither because it is pretty yucky. But it's just so much fun. It's funny. You don't really know what to expect. Even with the premise, you think you kind of know what you're getting, but you really don't. It's really wonderful, and I'm kicking myself for not having seen it sooner. It's got an excellent cast. Just, watch it if you haven't. Especially if you like James Gunn's films. It feels so much like the rest of his films. It fits right into his filmography. It's wonderful. Yeah, I really loved it. As you can tell, I'm watching a lot of horror movies in October because obviously it was Halloween, so yeah, I watched a lot of horror movies, by the way. But the next one is a true horror film, and that is American Murder, The Family Next Door. This is the documentary that circles around the Chris and Shanann Watts case that took over the country when it happened. It is pretty formulaic for a documentary, but so much information that wasn't exposed to the media is exposed in this documentary. It remains gripping. You wonder how this guy got away with it. And it's heartbreaking because, I'm not going to say anything if you haven't heard of the case and you're interested in watching the documentary. I think if you don't know anything about the case, you'll like the documentary a lot more than I did. I did still give it 3.5 out of 5 stars because, again, I like the information that I didn't know learning about it. But it does, again, feel very formulaic for a documentary. It follows the same steps as most documentaries do. But, again, it is worth checking out, especially if you haven't heard about the case and you're curious about it. It's a documentary, but if you're into true crime documentaries, you're gonna like it. Now, the next one up was one that didn't get a lot of great reviews, and that is The Bridge Curse, which I actually thought it was way better than most people did. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it just came out on Netflix this year. It's brand new. It is a Taiwanese horror film, and it's about how these group of students, there's this urban legend where they live, that if you go across this bridge, I think at midnight, and on this certain day, is it Valentine's? I don't even remember. I don't remember the date. There's a specific date. If you go across the bridge and go up the steps, there's an extra step added on that day at midnight, and then if you turn around and look behind you, you'll be haunted by the ghost that haunts the bridge. Obviously, these students don't believe it. They go to film it. Stuff happens, and yeah, it does follow a lot of these genre tropes, I will admit. You'll see a lot of stuff you saw in Ringu, Jew on the Grudge, Dark Water, yada yada yada, but it still scared me. It does rely heavily on jump scares, I will say that, so if you're not a fan of those, probably won't like this movie. Also, part of it is found footage, which it was kind of jarring jumping between the found footage segments and the actual, cinematic part of it. But, again, it actually scared me. It was effective. I was interested in the story. There are twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. So I highly recommend you check out The Bridge Curse if you're looking for a horror film that is fresh. It does rely on horror tropes, but it does make them fresh. And it is scary. Unless you hate jump scares, then it's not for you, but I really enjoyed it for what it was. Next up is Open Water. I hated this movie, as you can tell. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars because nothing freaking happens until the last 20 minutes of this movie. And I wanted to watch a shark movie. I've seen pretty much every shark movie that has come out of recent years, so I'm like, I'll watch Open Water because people were gushing about it. I hated it. I'm sorry if you love this movie. I just didn't like it. I was bored to tears. I felt like the characters were dumb. I know this is based off a true story, but the true story is more interesting than this movie, and they did change things for the movie. So definitely read about the true story. But if you haven't watched Open Water, not Dark Water, different movie, Open Water, I can't recommend it personally, but I mean, if it sounds interesting to you, I'm not going to say don't watch it, because you might love it. I just didn't like it. I thought the acting was terrible. It was very boring. It needed more sharks. I'm sorry. Okay, the next thing up is The Haunting of Bly Manor, but I'm not going to talk about it in this portion because it is a TV show. You can see my rating on the screen, but we'll talk about it later in the TV portion. Next one up was a hugely pleasant surprise, and that's Spontaneous, 4 out of 5 stars. One of the most surprising films of the year, and one of my favorites of the year so far. This stars Catherine Langford from 13 Reasons Why and Charlie Plummer, and this is a movie about how high school students, specifically senior year high school students, start to spontaneously combust. So of course everyone starts freaking out, they don't know who's next, and in the midst of this, Catherine Langford's character Mara and Charlie Plummer's character Dylan develop a romantic relationship. This movie has everything in it. It's going to make you laugh, it's going to make you squirm, it's going to make you smile, it's going to make you cry. I guarantee you're going to feel all the emotions. Be open. I know this sounds like it's going to be like a YA teen movie. It's really not. I wouldn't classify it specifically as horror, even though it is pretty gory, especially, with the spontaneous combustion. It's so many different genres, actually, but it melds them all together so well. It melds horror, romance, comedy, drama, all into one melting pot, and it works. So I highly recommend you watch this movie. Blew me out of the water. Again, 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely worth watching it. The next one up was decent, and I think I gave it a higher score than most people. Rattlesnake. It's by the director of 1922, another film that was meh. This one was just meh, but I mean, it was better than I thought it was going to be. So, Rattlesnake is about a woman who is traveling across the desert with her daughter. Her daughter gets bitten by a rattlesnake, and a mysterious woman helps her daughter. But then after her daughter is miraculously healed, there's no snake bite on her. The mother, played by Carmen Ejogo, learns that she has to do something horrendous before the sun comes up, or else her daughter's snake bite reappears and her daughter dies. The movie could have done with faster pacing, a little bit more action and suspense, but for what it's worth, it's competently filmed. Carmen Ejogo was really great as her character in this. And even though I knew pretty much what to expect, there's nothing that's going to surprise you about this movie, I thought it was really well done, actually. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Could have been better, but it's not as bad as what you're seeing on the screen here, in my opinion. The next film was another rewatch, and that is Ready or Not. I loved this film when I saw it in theaters last year. I think it was last year. And I rewatched it with my dad. It's a great horror comedy. Samara Weaving is excellent. Just the whole cast is excellent, to be honest. It's funny, it's gory. You don't know what to expect on the first watch. Even on the second watch, even knowing what's happening, it's still so much fun. And it's just, it's fun. It's about this bride who just marries into the family. On the night of her wedding at midnight, the family has a tradition that every time someone in the family gets married, their spouse has to pull a card and they play whatever game is on that card because they're magnates of a board game company. She pulls hide and seek, which means the family has to try to hunt her down and sacrifice her before the sun comes up. Really interesting. The directors have been helmed to direct, that's not correct. That rhymed. Have been hired to direct Scream 5, which sounds really promising to me. But if you haven't seen Ready or Not and you want a horror comedy, heavier on the comedy than the horror, check out Ready or Not, especially if you love Samara Weaving, because she's fantastic in this. I also watched The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which is a film by Jim Cummings, who is also the lead actor in this movie. And again, I was blown away, gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And this follows a police officer who is dealing with the possibility of a werewolf in his small town of Snow Hollow. But he's not just dealing with a threat of a possible werewolf. He's also trying to be a father to a rebellious teenage daughter. He's dealing with addiction, specifically alcoholism. It's just a powerful film. It's low budget, but they do so much with what they have. The effects look great. The acting is so good, especially Jim Cummings. And I loved it. It just handles this story so well, and it makes it so emotional. I went into it expecting just, a straight up werewolf movie. Definitely not that. Highly recommend you support Jim Cummings and watch this movie, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how it turns out. It's really excellent. I also watched Shudder, which is the original version, not the American version. It is on Netflix, and yeah, this movie actually terrified the crap out of me after I watched it. I watched it alone at night, and that was a mistake. This movie relies heavily on jump scares, which always get me, even if I'm expecting them. So again, if you're not a fan of jump scares, you probably won't like this movie, but I think it actually utilizes them in a really effective manner. The story sees this group of friends on the wedding night of one of the friends, and a couple, let me look up their names because I forgot, Ton and Jane. They're driving home after the wedding. They've had beverages to drink, adult beverages, and they hit a woman with their car, and they just drive off before the police arrives. After that, they start noticing weird blurs in the photographs that the man takes because he's a photographer. And they start seeing this woman appear in the photographs. It's just a really interesting story. You find out why she's attacking Ton and Jane and their friends. And it is heartbreaking, actually, to see what happens and what has made her such an angry ghost. And I was shocked by the story. The ending is mind-blowing. And yeah, it's really effective. It's actually genuinely scary. I really liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really glad I watched it, even though it did terrify me. Because I couldn't sleep for so long after I watched this movie. I finally fell asleep, but it scared me. It got me good. But it's a really excellent story. Really unique mechanics. The film still holds up pretty well today. Besides the fact that they used a Polaroid camera and they go to a film store to develop their film. Other than that, holds up really well. The movie is actually not a horror movie, so yay! It is Clouds. This is Justin Baldoni's second feature feature film as a director. And it's based on a true story of Zach Sobiech, which, if you don't know about Zach Sobiech, you can go on Soul Pancake's YouTube channel and watch their My Last Days documentary series. A whole episode is devoted to Zach and his struggles with cancer. But the story is about Zach. He's diagnosed with terminal cancer. He has dreams of being a musician. So he's determined to release a song before he dies. And this is just such a touching, expectingly emotional story with really great acting. Neve Campbell plays Zach's mom in the film. Stefan Argus is Zach. Sabrina Carpenter and Madison Eisman are in this as well. It's touching. If you watched 5 Feet Apart, you'll know Justin Baldoni's directorial style and why he focuses on the subjects that he focuses on. You are going to need Kleenexes, but it's just so uplifting, and you can actually listen to Zach's song Clouds on Spotify, iTunes, whatever. It actually went to #1 after this film debuted on Disney+. It's currently only on Disney+, I believe. But definitely check it out if you're into music, inspirational stories, films based on true stories. If you liked 5 Feet Apart, just check out this movie. It's really, really inspiring. Next movie I watched was Eyes Without a Face, which I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was excellent. And this is the first film I've seen by Georges Franju. This was really, really just mind-blowing. I don't want to say too much about the story because I feel like it spoils the whole movie. But let me just say it's about a doctor who is really twisted. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. This is a French film from 1960, and it still holds up extremely well today. It is black and white, but that actually kind of adds to the film in a way. There is one scene that is very, very gory, and I can see it making a lot of people sick. It didn't really affect me that much, but I could see squeamish people not making it through that one scene. But if you can handle squeamish stuff, definitely check this movie out. It's a masterpiece. It's beautiful. Every single minute of the film is beautiful. And just, yeah, the ending will make you go, yeah! It's really great. The next movie I watched, I also pretty much freaking hated. That's Session 9, which I loved Brad Anderson's other film, The Machinist. I think that's the only one I've watched of his besides this. But yeah, this movie was boring as all get out. There were a few creepy elements in this movie, but overall, I was bored. I was reaching for my phone a lot. It just, yeah, it just didn't work for me. The story follows some men who are hired to clear up asbestos out of an abandoned asylum. They go, creepy stuff happens. That's all I'm gonna say. It's, well, I know some people really love it. Like, if you look at the ratings, there are some low ones, but there's some 4.5s. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It just didn't do it for me, so 2.5. Next up, another one that was a pleasant surprise for me was Scare Me. Scare Me is also a horror film that is directed by one of its lead actors, Josh Rubin in this case. And the film sees Josh Rubin and Aya Cash both play writers, even though Aya Cash is a best-selling author and Josh Rubin's character is struggling to write a novel in the first place, and he's also an aspiring actor. But they're both taking a vacation in the Catskills, and they're in separate cabins, but there's a blackout that happens. So Aya Cash's character, Fanny, goes to Fred, Josh Rubin's character's cabin, and they just hang out and tell each other scary stories. But with each scary story, they get more and more disturbing, and they really utilize sound effects and imagery very well in telling these stories. You actually believe it's happening, even though it's obviously not. It's just, it reminds you of being a kid and telling scary stories in a circle. Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. It is a horror comedy. The ending surprised me, but I thought this was very well done. Josh Rubin did a fantastic job directing and starring in this movie. Aya Cash is wonderful as always. This is streaming on Shudder if you want to check it out. But yeah, I highly recommend it because it's very original. It's refreshing. It's not particularly scary to me, but I was intrigued enough to watch the whole movie, and I was blown away by how much dedication and work went into making this movie so palpable and so realistic. Next one up, I know I'm going to get disagreements on, but that's the 2020 version of Rebecca. I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I watched it right after finishing the novel. I'm not joking. And I really liked it. Even though most of it doesn't follow the book, like the second half completely veers off, I really enjoyed it. I loved Lily James as the unnamed second Mrs. De Winter. Armie Hammer was utterly charming as Maxim De Winter, which is a totally different, version of the character from the book and Hitchcock's version of the film. You can tell they have really intense chemistry in this movie. Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers. Oh my gosh. Fan-freaking-tastic. She is wonderful. A tour de force in this film. This movie is also utterly gorgeous, drenched in color. It is a Ben Wheatley film, but it doesn't feel like a Ben Wheatley film if you get my drift. It's not super crazy out there. It's just very grounded. But it does have his sense of opulence, of really utilizing what he has. Gorgeous visuals, great cinematography. even though this movie is over 2 hours, it went by really fast for me personally. And I did like the changes they made to the story, because I really don't like watching movies that follow the book to a T. I like when they make changes because it makes me feel like I'm watching something that is still connected to the book, but it's not a carbon copy. A lot of people did not like this movie, as you can tell from the ratings on the screen, but I actually really did. If you want to check it out, it's on Netflix. I would say, actually, this is probably going to be better for you if you've never read the novel, never watched the Hitchcock version, or any of the other versions of this. If you just watch this without any prior knowledge, I think you'll actually really like it. But even with my having read the novel, I really loved it. Another movie was The Strangers. I had seen bits and pieces of it before. It's average. I think it takes way too long to get to what it's trying to get to. Everyone pretty much knows the story. It's a home invasion film. Liv Tyler, Scott Spearman are a couple that are separated, but they move into a new home together on their first night in the home. Masked strangers come to the door, ask if some woman, I think her name was Tamara, is in the house. They say no, she hasn't lived there. And then they hound them. They harass them. Stuff happens. I think it could have been shorter, and it's already pretty freaking short, or more fast-paced. It just kind of drags things out, and it feels a lot longer than less than an hour and a half. So, I mean, I wasn't that impressed with it, but it was still entertaining enough to keep my interest. Okay, so I thought I would hate these movies, the next two movies I'm going to talk about, but I actually really enjoyed them. I don't like comedy, or at least modern comedy, but these movies, even though there were a few jokes I thought were mostly actually entertained me. So the first one up is Borat. I'm not saying that long-ass subtitle, okay? I'm just not. Of course, most people have already watched Borat, the first one. It's just Sacha Baron Cohen as his alias that he made on the Ali G show. And he's playing a Kazakhstan reporter who comes to America, and he's obviously pranking people because they don't know who he is. They don't realize that they're being used for this film. Some of the actors do know they're being a part of it, but most of them don't. It's just kind of funny to see what people reveal to people to a camera that is focused on them. They're just airing their views, and then, you know, it gets turned into a joke by Sacha Baron Cohen. It's really good. It's actually really good. It's actually funny for the most part. Some things, like I said, didn't land for me. Most of it did. Highly recommend watching it if you, by chance, haven't. And then the second movie was Borat, subsequent movie film. I watched both of these films in the same day. I gave them both the same rating, 4 out of 5. I do see why people do not like the second movie, though, because it is very political. And people know Borat by this point, because this movie takes place 14 years after the first one. So Sacha Baron Cohen had to get really creative with the costume disguises, and yeah, like I said, it's political. It does lean heavily towards one side, but I thought it was funny. And there's that one scene that everyone talked about, and you're gonna either think it's hilarious or disgusting or fake. But I think Sacha Baron Cohen knocked it out of the park again. I really loved Maria Bakalova as his daughter, Tutar. I think she was actually really the star of this film. It's just, yeah, it's worth watching. It's worth watching. If you like the first one, check it out. The next movie I watched was The Brood, which is a David Cronenberg film, but it doesn't really feel very Cronenbergian until about the end, I would say, to be honest. I was expecting more of his signature, you know, stomach-churning gore, and this is really a story about how divorce affects not only the two people involved in the divorce, but any children involved, and how painful it is. And I nearly cried several times during the movie because it was so touching, and it hit hard. And yeah, there are some gory moments, there are some WTF moments, but again, the major fulcrum of this film is about the pain of divorce. And I wasn't expecting that. It's great. I do recommend you watch it, especially if you're not really a fan of Cronenberg. I think this would be easier to stomach because there's less of his usual effects, you know? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next up is the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is a classic. It's wonderful. It feels completely different than the original film, which I love that one as well. Don't get me wrong, I love that one. I think I gave it the same rating as this one. But this feels fresher, and for the most part, the effects really hold up. Besides the few times they use special effects, the practical effects are great. But yeah, I loved the cast in this. Jeff Goldblum, Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, Veronica Cartwright, Art Hindle, who is also in, The Brood, the one I just mentioned previously. If you don't know what Invasion of the Body Snatchers is about, it's where the term pod people came from. As you can guess, people are being replicated and they're born out of pods and they're duplicates of people that are living, and paranoia ensues. It's a great movie. Check it out. Check it out. It's really wonderful. It's a wonderful horror sci-fi film. Next up, again, I'm going to mention this in the TV section, is The Queen's Gambit. You see I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but talking about it later. Next up is a movie I also didn't really like, and that is Wicked City. This is an anime film that came out in 1987, and I knew there were a few scenes of hentai in this. What I didn't know was that basically the whole freaking film is hentai. I don't like super sexual stuff, guys, and that's what this movie is. I like the premise of this movie, which is about how there's the Earth and the Black World, and an Earth cop and a Black World cop team up together, and their names are Taki and Makie. And they're trying to, bring peace to both worlds and try to settle relationships. But of course, that doesn't happen. The premise is super interesting, but honestly, I feel like this movie was made just to have an excuse to release a hentai film under the horror sci-fi genre. The animation is beautiful, I will admit that. The animation looks freaking great, but it's too much hentai. I was so uncomfortable watching this because my dad was in the other room and I kept having to turn the volume down. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it, okay? I expected a couple scenes of hentai, not the whole freaking movie! I'm too heated about this, but I felt like I was lied to, okay? I felt like I was walked into this trap, and I wanted to like this movie, guys, and it was all just hentai! I gave it 2.5 stars. Honestly, I probably would have given it 2, but the animation was so good, I bumped it up 0.5 star, and the premise was exciting, but it doesn't really do anything with it. It's just an excuse for hentai. I'll stop it! The next movie I watched was a rewatch, and that was Brightburn. I watched it with my dad because it came on Stars or Showtime or something. I still really like this movie. I gave it 3.5 stars again. It is a clever take on what happens if, Superman had come to Earth and he was evil instead of being a superhero. Again, this has Elizabeth Banks in it, and she's great as the mother of this boy, and his name is Brandon Breyer. I forgot the boy's... I'm forgetting all these people's names. I watch way too many movies, guys. But yeah. It's just about how everyone's like, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And then this boy is, being evil. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. It does feel a lot like Superman. But it's Superman if he went evil. Okay, this next movie I had actually tried to watch before, but I got 30 minutes in and my HBO Max froze. And now it's just like, that was crappy. Well, I love Keanu Reeves so much that I decided to give it another shot. I watched the whole entire movie this time, and I actually thought it was pretty well done. Pretty well done. 3.5 out of 5 stars. The first half is kind of meh, I will admit. The second half amps it up so much, though, that it redeems the movie, and I think Ana de Armas was the shining star of this movie. Lorenza Izzo's okay, but Keanu and Ana are the best. I won't say too much about the movie, but I will say that it follows Keanu Reeves, who is a husband and father, and his wife and children are going on vacation. He's staying at home to work, And as soon as they go, it's a rain-drenched night, and two young women knock on his door. They're saying they're trying to find this house, but their Uber dropped them off at the wrong place. They ask if they can use his phone, so he's being a nice guy. He says, yeah, sure. And he lets them in the house, and then things happen. And he gets in a lot of trouble, and these two women antagonize him. It's just really interesting to see how events unfold, what happens, and it's really a role that you don't really see Keanu in a lot. Some people will argue the acting is bad, which I'm not going to say is great. It's not great, but I think what happens in the film overcomes the lackluster acting for the most part, and it makes it a more interesting film. So if you want to check it out and you haven't yet, it's really popular on Netflix right now, in the US at least. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5. It's Eli Roth also, so take that with a grain of salt. The next one I watched, another rewatch, Perfect Blue. I do know now that there are two different versions of this movie, and the version I gave 5 stars to, I don't really know. I'm assuming it's the Japanese version. They're both Japanese, okay, but I'm assuming this is the one that aired in Japan. It's unrated. It's way better than the one you're going to see on the G-Kids Blu-ray, because I did not know there were two different versions. The G-Kids version has some scenes added. It deletes some things. I'm not there for it, okay? But the version I watched, which I have the DVD of, phenomenal. One of the best anime of all time. Satoshi Kon is just, one of my favorite directors, guys. He died way too soon. But this is just a psychological thriller. Some people consider it horror. It follows a young woman named Mima, who is a really famous pop star, but then she decides to retire from being a pop star and goes into acting. But when she goes into acting, she gets a lot of hate for it, and that causes her mental state to deteriorate, and she also has a stalker. It's just a really interesting look into fame and the psychology of it, and it's so great, guys. If you haven't watched it, try to track down the unrated version, because it is the superior version. I also watched His House, which got a lot of hype and buzz, and I just thought it was okay. I liked the premise and the themes, but I don't think it was executed correctly. It's about this couple who escaped from Sudan, and they seek asylum in England, and they're given this really pretty big house, honestly, for free, and they're told it's yours, just stay here. But when they move in the house, creepy stuff starts to happen. No one believes them. There's no evidence of the stuff happening after it happens. And that's all I can really say without spoiling things. But it follows and focuses on the tragedy of refugees who seek asylum in a different country, and how they struggle to acclimatize to a new setting, a new place, a new culture, but also the tragedy that they experienced in their home country. I just didn't think the movie gelled the horror genre with that very well. I do know a lot of people love this movie and gave it really high scores. Some people didn't. I gave it middle of the road. I think it could have been done a lot better, but it is a very brave film, and it's one that should be recommended for tackling the subjects it does. Just know it's possible it's going to be hit or miss. Yeah, that's all I can say. It does have Matt Smith in it too, but he's very rarely in it, so that was kind of disappointing for me because I love Matt Smith. But yeah, it's okay in my opinion, but watch it for yourself on Netflix and see what you have to think. And the last movie I watched in October was Halloween Town! This was my favorite Halloween movie as a kid, and I hadn't watched it since I was a kid. But I watched His House on Halloween, and I was disappointed. So I really wanted to watch something on Halloween that would, make the holiday feel like Halloween, because it didn't this year, honestly, because it's 2020. So I watched this. It's on Disney Plus. And oh my gosh, all the childhood nostalgia came rushing back to me, and I love this film just as much as I did as a kid. And that rhymed too. I love this movie. I will say the effects don't age well. They haven't aged well. They don't look like modern effects, but that's to be expected. This was a DCOM, a Disney Channel original movie that came out in 1998, so the effects, you don't expect them to hold up. But the themes of family, of finding yourself, discovering who you are, and just the fun nature of the film still really hold up. And I mean, Debbie Reynolds is just a treasure as Grandma Agatha Cromwell, Aggie Cromwell. Kimberly J. Brown is just charming as Marnie, the lead character in this. And yeah, I loved Halloween Town. I love it now. I loved it as a kid. I don't think that's going to change. So those were all the movies I watched in October. Let me, again, know if you've watched any of those and what you thought about them. Now let's move on to the TV portion. Okay, so let's mention the two series that I had rated in the movie section right now. First up, The Haunting of Bly Manor. A lot of people do not like this season, but I loved it. It is not as scary as Haunting of Hill House, but I do think that it trades the scares for really hard-hitting emotional beats. The film is based off of Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, and it sees a woman named Danny Clayton, who is played by Victoria Pedretti, travel to Bly Manor in England to be the nanny or governess of two children, Flora and Miles. And when she gets to Bly, she is taken aback by its beauty, and she loves the other employees that either live there or, come up there every day. But she doesn't understand and doesn't realize that the home is haunted. A lot of tragedy has happened there. This series, way more than the first, focuses on, romance, true love, the links we'll go to for love, but also it focuses on family and being there for the people you love. It's just, I thought it was really well done. There are some elements that are going to confuse people, especially the dream hopping, which I'm not going to spoil. Yeah, that's confusing. It really was confusing, but I really actually enjoyed that because it showed the backstory to the characters, what's happened. I just thought it was another win from Mike Flanagan. It was really good, in my opinion, and I loved how they set up each episode. I was glued. I wanted to keep watching after every episode, which is very rare for me for a TV show. It was excellent in my opinion, and I did cry because it was hard-hitting. I do recommend it. If you loved the first season, don't go expecting the same kind of show as that. But go in knowing it's going to be a much more emotional series than scary. And I think you'll be okay. But I really loved it. I really loved it. Also, gotta mention The Queen's Gambit, which is also on Netflix. This is superb. One of the best shows of 2020. Came out of nowhere, basically. And it's so damn good. It's based off the novel by Walter Tevis. And it stars Anya Taylor-Joy as Beth Harmon, a young woman who, at the age of 8, was living in a boarding school / orphanage for young Christian girls. And at the age of 8, every night this school would give the students tranquilizers, and she becomes hooked on them. Not because they put her to sleep, but because when she takes them, if she looks at the ceiling, she can hallucinate chess moves. And the custodian at the school, Mr. Scheibel, teaches her how to play chess, and she becomes just this child prodigy. And it sees her throughout the years as she grows up into a teenager, still being addicted to these tranquilizers, but she's just crushing everyone, every male, at all of these chess competitions. Again, I need to mention this takes place in the 50s and 60s. She's crushing all the male competitors there because chess wasn't really a female's game in those years. And she's just winning everything, but her gift comes at a cost. She's adopted by a family, but the father leaves after she's adopted. The mother is an alcoholic, and she has suffered from tragedy in the past that keeps haunting her. Beth herself becomes an alcoholic along with being hooked on the tranquilizers. And it's just a very emotional ride. You never know what to expect. And even though I don't give a crap about chess, I'm sorry, I don't understand it. I'm just not smart enough for it, I guess. But it made me interested to see how she would win each match, how she visualized each match. And I was just interested to see how she was going to overcome alcoholism and her addiction to pills, or if she was. And all of the performances were phenomenal. The cinematography is great. The visuals were outstanding. This is a wonderful series. I think it was 7 episodes. I could be wrong. But you're going to be glued to it. You're going to be hooked on it. And it's on Netflix, like I said. Check it out. Thank me later. Okay, let's talk about the other stuff that wasn't shown in the movie section now. First up is Utopia. This is the American version of the cult British series. It's on Amazon Prime, and Utopia follows 2 separate storylines. One storyline is about how this couple, when they're moving into their home, find this comic book called Utopia, which is the sequel to this really popular but niche comic book series, Dystopia. And they decide to auction off the comic book because all of these fans think it is out of existence and now it's come back, so a lot of people want to spend a lot of money to get their hands on it. But the other storyline concerns this deadly virus going around that is infecting children that they believe is coming through their cafeteria food, and they do make these 2 storylines intertwine. It's really interesting to see how they intertwine. The performances are great. It's got a great cast with Rainn Wilson, John Cusack, Jessica Roth, Desmond Borges, Sasha Lane, even more great actors. I do think a couple episodes kind of went but most of the episodes were really solid. I'm excited to see season 2 if it comes to fruition. Every episode, you don't know what to expect. There is a lot of gore, so be warned about that. But I thought it was a really excellently written show. This was written by Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl and Sharp Objects, so you know the writing is going to be really good in this series. And yeah, if you haven't watched Utopia and you're looking for a science fiction show to kind of scratch that itch, check it out. Also, I am loving the 11th season of Bob's Burgers. If you don't know, it's about the Belcher family, Bob, Linda, Tina, Louise, Jean, who run a burger shop, and they're just all going through different things, and it's hilarious. Every single episode is hilarious. Usually every episode has a signature song, and it's just lighthearted. It's something you watch and you just feel better. It makes you laugh. It's one of the only comedy shows that actually is funny to me. The animation style is something I love about it. It's just, I love this show. I watch it every week, and it just makes me feel better, especially this year, because I really need it, because this year's freaking stressful. I'm handling it so well, guys. Another series that actually made me laugh and lifted my spirits is The Cabin with Bert Kreischer. This is on Netflix, and it's actually a docu-series. It's only 4 episodes, I believe? 5 episodes? I think it's 5. And they're all 30 minutes or less. But Bert Kreischer is a comedian, which I do usually really love his stuff. So if you're a fan of Bert Kreischer, you're going to like this, I think, more than you would if you don't like Bert Kreischer. If you've never heard of Bert Kreischer, check it out. See if you like his style. But every episode, he has different celebrities and comedians come to this cabin he's at. And I forget where it's at. It's very remote and secluded. And they do weird stuff like coffee enemas. They cook emu meat. They throw axes. All this kind of stuff. But they also talk about life lessons. They talk about stuff they're struggling with or they have struggled with. You know, there is comedy because he is a comedian and a lot of his guests are comedians. But it also does make you think and appreciate life. And again, this was filmed before the crap show of 2020 became a crap show. So it's going to make you feel better. It's going to make you reminisce about the good old days. Because that's what they feel like. Good old days. I'm sorry, guys. 2020 is just getting to me. And it's now coming through. So, yeah. I'm late to the party. This show is just a really, really effective, charming tonic to everything that's going on, so I highly recommend you watch it. The last show I watched was the original version of Fruits Basket. Fruits Basket was the first manga series I ever read. I read it in high school. I loved it. And then for some reason I never watched the anime. And I do know there's a reboot. I am going to watch the reboot at some point, probably in the near future. But I wanted to watch the OG version because it's where it all started with the anime portion. And I swear to God thought there were 2 seasons because when I went to Hulu, I thought it said the first season was 52 episodes, which is actually 26, but they're sub and dub episodes. And the second season was 13. So I watched all 26 episodes. And then I'm like, okay, on to season 2. There is no season 2. I looked it up. I guess it was the Mandela effect or something. I don't know. But I could have sworn there was a second season of the OG version and there's not. I don't know what happened. But let's get back to the point though. The anime centers on this really charming teenage girl named Toru Honda who has lost both of her parents, her mother most recently, and she's homeless. She's living in a tent. And one day, the Soma boys, Shigure and Yuki goes to her school, discover she's living in a tent near their property. So they offer to let her stay at their house free of charge, as long as she cooks and cleans. And she accepts because, living in a tent where there are landslides is not very safe. But when she moves into the Soma household, she discovers that if they hug a person of the opposite sex, they turn into an animal from the Chinese zodiac, and she has to keep their secret. This is just such a cute, adorable show. I loved all of the characters that I was supposed to love, hated the characters I was supposed to hate, which there's only like one character you're supposed to hate, really. Oh, there's a couple more than that, but one major character you're supposed to hate. And even then, it's really hard to hate that person after you find out their history. But it's just such an optimistic show. I am bummed that it ended after 26 episodes because they really just had to tie it up because the manga series was still ongoing at that point. So I am hopeful that this new rebooted version covers the manga and you get to see a more satisfying conclusion than what the 2001 version was. But I still recommend it because it's just so cheerful and charming and cute and wholesome. Like, they don't even say curse words besides, a-hole. That's the worst word I heard ever uttered on that show. You can watch it with your family. There are some jokes that adults will get but will fly over the heads of kids. It's perfect. It's just perfect, guys. It's so good. I love it. Okay, the last portion of this video is books because I didn't really play any new games in October that wowed me. So the first book I loved and read in October was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And this was phenomenal. The first 20 pages, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I almost DNF'd it, but I stuck with it, and it ended up being this beautiful gothic romance and also a suspense novel. And it's like the movie. It follows this woman who is unnamed, and she meets Maxim de Winter while she's staying at a hotel in Monte Carlo with her boss. And they go on this whirlwind romance, and her boss tells the unnamed narrator that they're going to go to New York. She's heartbroken, so she goes to Maxim. Maxim proposes to her. They get married. They move to Manderley, his estate in England. But then the shadow of his first wife, Rebecca, looms over everything, and it really puts a strain on their marriage, on the unnamed narrator's sanity, her self-esteem. It's just really well written, and I love this. If you haven't read it, this is a classic book, and even though it was written in 1930, it doesn't have language that you're not going to understand. It is very clearly written. It holds up well to contemporary standards, and yeah, I think it's a book that you definitely should read because it is a classic. It did inspire Alfred Hitchcock's version, which is extremely faithful to this novel. And the new version, which is not faithful to, but I think it makes welcome changes. There are some elements in this book that are troublesome today, like descriptions of certain people, which do get rectified in the new movie. But if you can look past those issues, which you need to address today, but back then it was different. But anyway, get past those issues, realize they're troublesome, but still enjoy the book. I think it's classic. And the second book I loved. And I might be a little biased because I love Elise Willems from Funhouse. And she wrote a book, and it's called A Night in Halloween House, and this is her first novel. It is technically a children's Halloween book, but honestly, I think this is perfect for older children and adults who want to feel nostalgic, because it just reminded me of my own childhood, and I think if I hadn't been a scaredy cat as a child, I would have loved to have read this during the holiday season, Halloween season. It's just so good. The friendship between the characters reminds me of the friendship between the characters in It. It has a very Goonies-esque vibe. And yeah, it's just so charming. It's very short. I read it in a single day. It's so good. It's so nostalgic. And it actually has really important lessons and themes in it about friendship and not judging people for who they are. And I think Elise did a wonderful job writing this. And I really hope she writes more books, because I know she's a producer and, you know, one of the leads on Funhouse. But she has a real talent with writing, and this book is wonderful, and I highly recommend you pick it up. And I'm going to save this book in case I have future children, because I think they would really enjoy it. I'm speaking for unborn children now. But yeah, I'm going to save it because I think if I do have kids, or, you know, I might read it every Halloween and just be nostalgic. But yeah, it's really good, and I recommend it. Even though I do love Elise from Funhouse, she's a really good author as well. So those are my favorites in October. I know this was a super freaking long video. I'm sorry. I hope you had snacks and drinks. If not, I'm sorry. My voice is going. But if you like this video, leave a like. Let me know down below your favorites for October, November, today, yesterday. Let me know. And if you checked out any of the stuff I mentioned, let me know what you thought about it. Share the video if you liked it. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you'll be alerted every time I upload a new video. If you'd like to follow me on social media, all those links are in the description box below the video. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.